So, fun little fact on the Sakamoto Ryoma Wikipedia page. If you, okay, well, first of all, obviously it's not, where's Ryoma? Why is this not him? Who's this fake? If you scroll down here to this picture, this is actually the exact same photograph that Nakaoka hands you near the end of the game where you're meeting at that inn. It's the same exact photo. It's got Takechi's face, same pose, same background, same setting. And it's just pretty cool that RGG decided to include that inside the game. More importantly, though, the reason why I'm actually on this page is because I believe, as a personal witness to the Bakumatsu era events, that I can have a very big beneficial impact to the lore accuracy of this page. So we're going to be making some edits to the Wikipedia page here. Just ignore this. Don't worry. Just ignore that my IP address will be publicly visible, and instead focus on the history we're about to make right now. So first of all, there's no need to make changes here. His name is indeed Sakamoto Ryoma. He did live in Kyoto. That is correct. He also died in Kyoto. That is also correct. He is also a child. Yes. Everything else seems to be pretty much lore accurate and in place. I don't have any problems with this part. He is from Tosa. He then became a Ronin, and his brother is Takechi. As you can see here, this is accurate. His brother is indeed Takechi. He also had 3 sisters, but I guess they weren't in the game. His wife is indeed Oryo, we know that. And he had a child, Taro. What, he named Taro after like his farm on the Another Life place? Okay, but that's not true. That there is one more child too that isn't mentioned, so I gotta add Haruka. There we go. Now this is lore accurate because now Haruka is here. Perfect. So with that change, I think everything else is fine. No need to make any other references here. Everything else is accurate. Yeah, so I just needed to add Haruka because Haruka wasn't exactly in the lore already. So I'm just gonna source my material now. Source, and the source is that I was alive during this period. And the briefly describe your changes would be I was there. Perfect. Okay. And publish. Welcome to Like a Dragon Ishin's Lookback. You know the rules, but I'm still going to repeat them anyways. I'm going to talk about story, characters, and game functions. You know, it's pretty crazy that this is the 6th Lookback, excluding Skyrim, because it wasn't a new game for me. I just realized I've been doing this for quite a while now. I know I said I'm going to try to keep these short, but this one might actually be for real. Despite how large this game is, I don't have quite a lot to add. Perhaps it's because I've played so many of these games, but I think it's more because this story is based on historical events. So I'm not going to be like, why did Ryoma not use his level 99 troopers to take over Kyo? Either way, let's begin with the story. When it comes to Ishin's story, it felt very artificial playing it the second time around. Once you realize that Takechi is the mastermind to Ryoma's journey, it made me feel that the decisions that Ryoma made since he got to Kyo were basically all calculated and diminished the tension and urgency of his actions. Inoue, Katsura, Yamazaki, and Oryo were all reporting to Takechi, but their personal reasons are never really explained. Oryo is the only exception in which her falling for Ryoma was most likely not calculated. Did I say Oreo? Oh my god. Anyways, I found Takechi's grand plan to be very similar to Ikutsuki's plan in P3P. It completely relied on the other party to be successful in their own journey so that they can become the catalyst to the finale. In Takechi's case, the Sakamoto Ryoma identity was really cool symbolism and really built up of how Japan's future would be formed depending on who wins the duel. And the conclusion with Toyo's death and impersonation was an interesting spin I didn't expect. However, after thinking about the ending, it's quite strange that Ryoma lets Takechi live. Takechi gave the order to burn down Kyo, and he even had his own informants killed, such as Inoue and Yamazaki. Even though he also kills Toyo, it's a surprisingly bittersweet end where Ryoma decides to trust in Takechi's future actions despite everything that he's committed. Ishin is also a lot more centered around JP players, which is obvious because they're the intended audience. There's a lot of terminology and history to comprehend, but it does become easier to make sense of the factions thanks to the glossary and memoirs. It made sense that most characters didn't get any development due to it sticking to historical events, and with the Bakumatsu setting, I think RGG made a very good decision in making the story short, but engaging with real events. The only negative I have is the amount of times the game sends you back and forth from Teradaya to the Shinsengumi HQ. It's most likely to increase the probability of the player running into sub-stories and minigames, but it was funny the amount of times it happened until it happens like 5-10 times. Finally, I want to talk about the themes of identity in this game. Some characters have fake names, others have multiple allegiances. In Ryoma's case, he's trying to prove his identity. Interestingly enough, at the end of the game, that pursuit is no longer important. Sakamoto Ryoma is no longer the person. He's not even really an icon. It's this forgotten identity that doesn't really need proving as we, the player, send Japan off towards a hopeful future. I interpret the message of "This is Japan" as a really great finale. It rejects this idea of a national loss of identity and also addresses that because of this decision, the road ahead will be difficult and uncertain. But having hope in the future and the people that lead it is what we choose. It's a very beautiful motive. Most Yakuza games have themes of broad topics like the past catching up to you, important people and relations, or Yume. But in Ishin's story, the theme is about reflecting that today's Japan was possible because of the decisions we made in the past. Characters are going to be super short, because instead you can just read the history books. Jokes aside, whether each character's actions in the game's story is lore accurate to Kyo's real-life history is probably not true. If anything, I would definitely find it hard to believe that 2 Shinsengumi captains were able to raid Tokugawa's castle, or that real-life Ryoma went around town being the best of friends with every stranger around every corner. I did enjoy the massive amount of character cameos from the rest of the games, though, throughout the adventure. Even small one-time appearances such as Shinji or Shimano were really cool to see as Easter eggs. That aside, I don't have anything outstanding to comment on, especially for any particular character. I do like that you can customize each captain's howdy, and all the characters' personalities from the Yakuza games fit relatively well with their Ishin counterparts. The game felt really rewarding as someone who's played most of the games, as I was anticipating which character was who from which game. The only negative, I guess if I had to say, was that they didn't include any judgment characters. I can definitely picture Yagami and the gang, and even Kuroiwa, being a cool little DLC as a side detective arc. Either way, that's all for this section. If they do remake Kenzan, which I do hope, I would be interested to see who they cast for that game as well. Functions in Yakuza. Sorry, I mean, like a Dragon games are the true entertainment, or perhaps the bane of every player. Although these explorable worlds can appear overwhelming, Kyo was a refreshing city to explore with its own set of unique activities. Though I do question why they decided to use the old engine and system from Yakuza 0 and Kiwami. While I don't mind them personally, it does feel dated with the lack of quality of life that the Dragon engine has. Perhaps they made this choice to match the canonical play order of the games, so you'll want to start with this game as your first experience because it's so different from the others, and it builds anticipation for the other titles since it features so many cameos. Either way, Ishin has a lot of side content outside of the main story. If I had to approximate, it has less than Yakuza 5, but around the same amount as Yakuza 0. Pretty impressive, and given that Ishin takes place in a new setting with new maps and locations, there's plenty to explore and learn about Kyo. In fact, if you're a history buff, there are memoirs around the city that go more into Kyo's historical events during this Bakufu period. So now let's talk about combat. There is a surprising amount of unique combos you can perform in this game. There are 4 stances with 4 masters that train you. I found that personal level didn't really matter, but what did was the style level. Styles have 2 soft caps during the game, and as you engage in combat more and learn all the abilities, Ryoma becomes an absolute monster on the field. Paired with a sword and gun that has a bunch of seals, you can have a lot of fun mixing and matching each stance for different enemy types and groups. Never found the crafting system in these games to be extraordinary, and to be honest, this one isn't either. Luckily, if you're a casual player, you don't need to engage with this system at all. The story's weapons you get from the boss fights are more than enough to keep you prepared for pretty much most of the game's content. Next, I want to quickly address the small pieces of side content in the game. Unlike most Yakuza titles, the game splits completion into 2 categories: the diligence records and the completion list. I don't know why they decided to format it like this, but it really is just bloat. It would have been simpler to just create a category in the completion list labeled as virtue to associate these activities with the resource. If you're a familiar player to these titles, then most of the minigames in this game are also recognizable. You have the same gambling games, the chicken racing from Yakuza 5, and a different variant of Tatsuya's noodles at the udon shop. Friendship system from Yakuza 0 returns. The Mukudo Gai arena is basically purgatory, and it has a hybrid mix of revelations and learning new heat actions through consistent use from the remastered trilogy. These aren't negatives, by the way, unless you're aiming for completion and you don't know how to play Mahjong still, but these systems are still entertaining, as they are in each title. I just find it strange why every friendship encounter always involves me giving the other person food. Is this like symbolism to today's increasing grocery prices, maybe? Either way, Ishin does offer its own uniqueness in activities. There is a singing bar, which is karaoke, featuring new songs and returning ones from past games. Okita has the best song, by the way. That is objective, and that is a fact. There's also Buyo dancing, which is a classical Japanese dancing art. This new minigame is surprisingly tough, but a very welcome challenge as a rhythm game player. I wish I could watch other characters perform as I can back them up, kind of like singing, but oh well, missed opportunity. And with all of the small functions about Kyo discussed, I want to finish this look back by talking about the larger systems now: Another Life and Troopers. Another Life is this alternate and completely disconnected arc and portion of Ryoma's life. It doesn't get mentioned by anybody in the game besides the involved parties, nor does it relate to any sub-stories either, except for the pets. Hence, Another Life. It's a pretty big contrast to the tension and overall intense atmosphere of the main story, so I think it's a decent addition as a system. The minigames were short and simple enough to understand. It almost made me feel like I can actually cook and garden as well. But by the way, I can't. The trooper system, on the other hand, was a lot more simpler than it appeared. I thought it was going to be similar to Majima Construction in Kiwami 2 and the mercenary type of missions almost in Yakuza 6, if I recall correctly, but it's nothing like that at all. It's very hands-free. These troopers come in the form of cards, literal cards, and these cards are literal abilities. Thankfully, you can add for free these elite troopers to your team. It's great, and it basically eliminates the need to spend any amount of video recruiting. Elite troopers come with max promotion level, max trooper ability, and max corporal traits, which is basically the best you can get out of any single unit. So if you want to cruise through the system, then it's very possible by just using them. They also give you the great stats too, because they're the highest rarity and level cap, so you don't have to worry about raising them or maintaining them. I don't even think they desert you either, so there's that too. That aside, I did find it funny that the trooper cards themselves really didn't affect the actual minigame associated with it. The battle dungeons are one of the more challenging combat systems in the game. However, it's very doable without making use of the troopers. By the way, if you're a collector, then you have something to work towards in gathering all 400 of them. The only reason this is tough is because the max capacity you can have is 500. And that's all I have to say. My overall thoughts on this game are quite mixed, and not in a bad way. I think this is a great game if you're a new player to the Yakuza or LAD games, and I also think that you'll feel a lot of nostalgia and even rewarded if you play this game as a veteran player. I think a title like this definitely adds a lot of new opportunities being standalone in its own style and plot, but still being grounded in what makes the Yakuza franchise itself. But now that our business in Kyo is concluded, I think it's time to depart to a future version of Japan. See you in Soul Hackers 2. That rhyme? No, it didn't. I'm crazy.